Okay. All right. So, namaste, brother Sumangala.
Namaste, Bhante
Um,
Virpanyo.
yeah. So you are you have ordained as a novice monk. You've been accepted to by members of the sangha who are more senior. Okay. To accept you, to put on the robes and start to make your way. All right, as a monk. Now, in the idealistic world, in the world of idealism pertaining to a monk and becoming a novice monk, it would be like you have just been born again and that you now had a loving, caring, wise, ideally enlightened father that was fully taking care of you and taking responsibility for you. And so you would basically, ideally, be on a leash with a monk that was more experienced than you, that ordained you as a novice, and you're just following them around, you're serving them, you're attending to them like a father and son, okay, like a kung fu master and disciple. Just like in an idealistic world, all children would have not just a loving mother, but a loving father and a loving family and a loving society to keep them engaged and involved and informed and fed and everything and protected constantly, right? This is what it takes in the world of idealism. But this is not an ideal world, okay? I grew up, I guess, I had two loving parents. They divorced, and, from there, a lot of suffering, a lot of anger, a lot of neglect, a lot of confusion, um, and a lot of self harm and harming others that wasn't necessary, right? And that led me somehow to becoming a monk, right? Making mistakes towards myself, making mistakes towards others, and then dealing with the mind of making mistakes. And a mind full of making mistakes is a mind that is primed for mental health issues, okay? Greed, anger, and delusions, right? So, and we're in the West, we're in America, so we've heard about this notion of born again, right? So you go to church and you tell Jesus and God that you love him. You say, Jesus, come in my heart, and I accept you, and I'm born again, right? I'm healed by the light, cleaned by the water. And, we don't have that in Buddhism, but we do have the possibility to become a monk. You receive a new name, you receive a new chance to live your life. And this is primarily about taking refuge, okay? So the robes that you're wearing, and the robes that I'm wearing as well, even though I'm a bhikshu, a higher ordination, or a full monk, and you're a novice monk, which is like a monk in training, we're both living as a monk to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. We can think about the Buddha as the potential to become free, enlightened. Okay, you're not enlightened, I'm not enlightened, but we take refuge in the potential to become free. That's why we are monks, all right? Secondly, we take refuge in the Dhamma. So that is taking refuge in mindfulness. So just a present moment mindfulness, seeing things as they are moment by moment. But the wisdom of that is we're taking refuge in detachment. Okay, so we're taking refuge in the ways and means and the skillful teachings to learn how to detach from our delusions, our anger, our greed, and to be free and to heal, and to keep practicing, to keep going down on this road. Thirdly, we're taking refuge in the sangha. All right, now there's two elements of sangha. One is the ordained sangha, meaning monks and nuns, meaning people who are ordained formally, who wear the robe, who have experience in the community, in the society of monkhood. All right. The higher Sangha is, and also in taking refuge in the monks and nuns, we're taking refuge in supporters, because monks and nuns cannot exist without people donating to us, giving us food, helping us for our basic necessities, maybe for travel, because if we don't eat, we will die. And if we need to go somewhere, but we don't have a job or we're not making money, we're monks, so we may have to ask for support, or we take refuge in the support that they give. Okay, but mainly we're taking refuge in our community of monastics. Okay, now the higher sangha is the Arya sangha, meaning that people who have tasted the fruit of enlightenment. Okay, and because we are not enlightened, maybe we can't determine that, and even then, only the Buddha actually knows someone is enlightened or not, and what level they're at. So now, as a monk, but also as someone who's kind of coming across Buddhism and coming across an access point to Buddhism, it's your responsibility to make as best use of it as you can to continue. And that means that to the best of our abilities, we need to rely on well-known advisors, and we need to rely, because we're monks, we have to rely on other monks and senior monks especially. So for example, who is the most senior monk here? Sayadaw Otamatara. Who is the second most senior monk here? Bhante Warapanyo. So that's not always going to work out. Sometimes the most senior monk might not be very reliable. So you have to discern, etc. But you want to know about that system and try to make use of that. And usually you can find that out through communication. So someone who is a well-known advisor or who is reliable will be able to communicate reliably. They may not give you the answer that you want. They may not help you in the way that you want them to, but they can communicate reliably. So you can rely on their advisements because you can communicate about it. So, because we are ordained, we have more chance to look into the teachings, we have more chance to look into the precept body, and we have more chance to look at what our lives will be and what our lives will mean when we are not focused on getting a girlfriend, when we're not, or boyfriend, or we're not focused on getting a job, or we're not focused on making money, or we're not focused on finding an apartment to live at or maintaining our apartment, when we're not focused on getting more material objects, and actually entertaining these notions about letting go of material objects more and more, what we already have. So, all that said, the responsibility is on you. When I first stepped onto like the aspiration to be a monk or a yogi full time, I already had experience in meditation, and I'd done some retreats and I'd met some teachers, but the 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 decision was a decision I made alone. And then my initial steps were alone. And I had a lot of arrogance. So I was in America, I was going to different Buddhist temples, and I remember one master who's I still hold very closely, who accepted me into the temple, and they didn't have a compost. They weren't doing compost at the temple. So I was so arrogant and ridiculous. I said, well, I can't stay at this temple. They're not even composting. How can they have wisdom? So that led me to leaving. I wasn't a monk yet. I was in America. Leaving that temple, going to different places, and eventually, falling flat on my ass. And this is what you're going to have to be willing to do. You're going to have to be willing to fall flat on your ass. And at that time, I wasn't a monk yet. And then I said, okay, to do this, I need community. I need support. I knew that intuitively. And I was looking on Wikipedia and I saw Buddhist countries. I can see the Wikipedia page in my mind. Thailand, 99% Buddhist. Myanmar, 99% Buddhist. So I'm from America. I'd visited some temples. They have a monk there, two monks there, some Asian monks, light-skinned Asians, dark-skinned Asians. It is a little bit of an experience, but that, what does that mean? 99% Buddhist country. Okay? So I knew in myself somehow that that was where I needed to go. I needed to go into the Buddhist country, the Buddhist community to take refuge. So I didn't have experience being a monk. I didn't have experience living at a monk's temple with other monks. I had talked in it just I had almost no exposure to Buddhist culture or society or what it would mean to be a monk. But somehow I knew. So I booked a ticket to Thailand. I'd never been out of the country before. And I flew and I told my family and gave away my things last minute. I said, I'm going to Thailand to become a monk. They also haven't traveled. My family wasn't a traveling people. Okay. I went to Thailand. I started knocking on doors. I want to be a monk. Okay. I did knock on a couple doors, couple temples first. And then I connected with a monk and it went from there. And I can't tell you how many times I've fallen flat on my face, flat on my butt, broken my ankle, you name it, whatever, okay? Sickness and difficulty. But I knew, and I know somehow intuitively in myself, that even though the truth is not about Buddhism, or the truth is not about the kind of clothing that I wear, that this clothing and Buddhism is about the truth and leading me in that direction. So I take refuge in that. And I take refuge in the community of monks. That's kind of where you need to start with. And then as time goes by, you'll have more experience to have more faith. And as you have more faith, you'll be able to make better use of people, better use of monks to guide you and to make use of the practices and the teachings that they have there. But you have to have the grit to continue, and to know that the reason that you're doing this is not about your ego, but so that you can be free. And so your ego now is to be used to bring you to freedom. And it's not going to be perfect, right? Day by day or moment by moment, but the direction that you are going in, especially because you already become a novice monk, is kind of laid out. But it's up to you to take that direction. Okay. And so when we say, Thailand is a Buddhist country, Myanmar is a Buddhist country, Sri Lanka is a Buddhist country, okay, they're a monastic Buddhist country. So when you hear that, you have to have faith in that, and you have to be willing to take refuge in that, because that's what it's all about. And if you know that you need a lot of support, well, that would be a place to go. And you need to be brave, and you need to be ready. And if that means you need to go work at In-N-Out Burger to save up a couple $100, well, that's fine. That's what you do. And then you go forward, to get a ticket. Hopefully, we can support you. Seattle tomorrow can support you to get over there. But the monastic life is fundamentally a homeless life. You ever experience homelessness? Wandering kind of thing? Doesn't matter. That's what it fundamentally is. Only we're taking the practice of homelessness and wandering as a way to practice generosity or renunciation, as a way to practice virtue, and as a way to cultivate ourselves in meditation. So we just drag ourselves step by step towards the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, towards the path. We take refuge in that. Let's take a moment to meditate, then you go to talk with Seattle. Sure. Yeah, because he's alone now, so it's a good time to talk with him. So in meditation, through the breathing, uh, willing to feel suffering, especially, or willing to feel whatever's there, through the breathing, through the act of breathing. And willing to let go and not identify with whatever is there, which means we keep sitting, keep breathing, keep being aware. And we may feel quite deep tinges of emotions or quite deep thoughts or quite deep aspects of the body or the mind come up. And it's not that any of that means anything, it's just that through the breathing, willingness to not get a hold of that and not identify with that, not attached to that. And so if there's something that stays there, some sensation in the body or some aspect of the mind of thinking, uh, we can be aware of that and breathe with that without identifying. Okay, you want to go talk to Seattle?
I was gonna speak with him with Cindy, so I was gonna.
Oh, you're waiting for Cindy to come. Okay.
She said 3:30, but I could give her a call and tell her.
No, I'm sure she'll be here. She's a pretty timely woman. So we'll just wait for her.
Can you tell me a little bit about the adversity that preceded your ordaining before going into Thailand?
Yeah, so I was living in Seattle, and of course, all of this, comes back to, my childhood and traumas I went through, and the separation of my parents, and a lot of it was neglect, a feeling of neglect, and experience of neglect, and lack of attention. And I was a child that needed a lot of attention, and my mother was a single mother and working all the time, and my dad also worked a lot. There's a lot of moving around, a lot of back and forth. So it wasn't just neglect of a lack of attention or a lack of experiences, but a lack of stability in those experiences. So I would move from one place to another, and while I was living there, I'd meet like a best friend, and then, almost be adopted by their family, and so that was really nourishing. And then I'd move away and never see those people again, and basically lose something that was so fundamental to who I was, and then going to another school and another area, and it was very destabilizing. And it's a quality I have in my mind, is an affinity towards instability. But as I've practiced more, I can kind of see through the confusion of that instability. So it's just like temporariness expressing itself. It's impermanence expressing itself. So before I became a monk, I was in Seattle and I had a really nice gaming PC. I was staying at a really nice, like communal living space with a bunch of cool Seattleites. I was smoking a lot of weed. I was dabbing. I was dabbing in the morning. I was dabbing at lunch break for work. I was dabbing. I dab until I passed out in the evening. I mean, I was just stoned all the time, and I was enjoying it a lot, and had a great relationship and just a primo job where I could show up when I want, leave what I want. I mean, we're talking about an hour and a half paid lunch break. It was just, I was good friends with the owner. The owner was very friendly to me. And somehow, in the midst of all that, I realized that none of this was leading me somewhere that I wanted to go. Um, a lot of what I was doing was based on fear. A lot of what I was doing was based on an expectation to um, do something that didn't come from my heart and didn't come from my intuitive wisdom about being free and knowing myself and knowing what freedom was, which is something I still feel like I need to know at a very deep level. So the first step that I took was I started to live as like a full-time meditator, a full-time yogi. I left my job, I left my house, I left my relationship. I started to live in my car in Seattle, and I was doing like a very kind of unstable bodhisattva um, practice where I was trying to take in as much suffering as I could from the homeless and the sick and the mentally ill and just the people driving around I would see. And, and then I was trying to take that in and like release it and transform it, So I was using the little money that I had to buy pizza for homeless people and drug addicts, and just putting myself out there. And I was really, I wasn't sleeping much, I wasn't eating much, and I was always in this kind of anxious spiritual state, is how I would describe it. And after a few weeks of that, it led me to this place where it was like my energy was leaving my body. Like it was just it was really unstable, and like I was losing my health and the energy in my body. And so I knew a temple nearby, which is a master that I still love and respect, is a Vietnamese Zen master, has a place in Jacksonville now. And I went to his temple, and I'd been there before, some of his lessons and meditations, and I showed up there in this completely vulnerable state where I was like, my body was falling apart. And it wasn't that my mind felt so like crazy or confused, but it was just so exhausted and tired and strung too tightly and too loosely at the same time. It was just, and I went there and we had a meeting together, and I started crying, and I said, can I come and stay here? Can I come and be with you? And he was crying. He just asked me if I was like taking any medications or anything. I said no. Um, so he accepted me to stay there, and immediately from that place where I was, and then going to this Buddhist temple and talking to this monk, and then he just starts to let me stay there. First of all, there's no cultural context for how that's possible as an American. And don't expect that to happen to anybody. You just show up at a temple, they let you in. But that's what happened. And from resting there for a night or two, it was like all the water came back into my body and my mind. It's like I felt so much healing and so much empowerment and so much safety that I wasn't feeling when I was living in my car going around like that. And, like I said, after a couple weeks of kind of getting stronger and feeling more independent, then the arrogance came up again. And I said, well, they don't compost here. So it's not ideal. So I can't stay here. And then I went around with this kind of idealism and this idea of meditating all the time by myself. And I ended up this time once again completely exhausted and now also running out of money and just completely losing myself in Colorado, living in my car. And it got to a breaking point where I called my grandma and I, was crying and said, you know, I don't know what to do. And the spiritual thing wasn't working out. And then I had just abandoned this great job, this great relationship, this, money, all these things that I had up there. And I was just desperate and alone in Colorado. So she sent me some money and I drove from Colorado to Maryland, where my grandma lived at that time. And I was so vulnerable and so scattered and so like falling apart in how I was practicing alone, right, and taking in all this energy from outside that I mean I could barely drive. Mentally I could barely drive. I could barely go from place to place. Like it was just like my body and mind were falling apart from vulnerability and just not a feeling of safety and not a feeling of refuge. There was nowhere I could take refuge. And I got back to my, grandparents' place, and I took some time to settle and, gain a few pounds and settle in. And I did. I found myself to be depressed and anxious and mostly just like what had I done, giving up all that success that I'd had, in Seattle, this materialistic success. But I knew that um, in some ways that was what I wanted to do. I just needed support to do that. So I started looking into Buddhism and Buddhist countries and monks, and I got up the courage really through all that suffering, through putting myself through that washer of suffering and like trying to do it myself and failing and seeing the success in materialism and feeling the spiritual power and efficacy and like freedom in that, because there was a lot of freedom in that, that it put me in this position to go and take refuge in the Sangha and to be, because like I said, I'd never met Thai people. I'd never spent time as a part of a Thai community. I'd never been out of the country. I'd never been on a flight to anywhere. I had no idea what really monasticism was going to be. I just had faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, mainly through my practice of meditation and some study. And so I went there and things happened naturally, and I found myself to ordain, and then I had it to work. I had it to try. I had it to continue to rely on these robes and this form to keep going in that direction that actually was the original direction that I wanted to go in when I left my business life or my materialistic success behind. But I just didn't have the support or the wisdom to do that. Uh, so, now I'm a Buddhist monk for 6 years, and I've helped a lot of people. I've reached a lot of people, um, with my online work, and I've been, received a lot of kindness and support from people and encouragement to keep taking on this role and keep helping others. Still a lot to figure out. And so instead of me trying to dissect my brain to figure it out, I already have the answer. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. I take refuge in dana, sila, bhavana, samadhi, panya. I take refuge in virtue. I take refuge in renunciation and letting go. And I take refuge in the Sangha and the monasteries and the temples and the monks and the teachers that I identify. And that's all a work in progress. That's all a movement, right? But I don't have to be idealistic about being virtuous, because the more mindful I am and the more that I put myself into this position in this life, the more clear I am about this is quite good, but maybe I can't do that right now. This is quite bad, so I can't do that right now. And just coming more and more close to the middle, right? So that I can help more people, and so that I can find my freedom in not just where I am now, of course, that's the most important point, but also in how I'm directing and living my life. And I've had to take some steps back from community building and teaching so that I can uh, find more clarity and authenticity in terms of myself and my heart, so that I'll be even more available for people in the future. And more available for myself as well, in the midst of being available for others. Kind of like I've been training myself more to be a student. Because once you get into that teacher role, and uh, if you can't kind of get checked, or get some some help to not see yourself in that light, you'll get lost in that forever, and then that's pride, that's arrogance, that's overconfidence, that's not coming from a place of peacefulness. So the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha are very reliable, but it's not ideal. And so you have to be ready to, in some sense, take on the homeless life without idealism, but with knowledge about the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha, and representing that for others, and coming back to that for yourself when things get difficult, instead of coming back to lay life, or instead of coming back to making money, or instead of coming back to seeking after some relationship with somebody. We're, as monks, we're seeking a relationship with the Buddha, and we take refuge in teachers that seemingly have an even greater and deeper relationship with the Buddha. So that's why we ask them for help. That's why we ask them for support, whether it's material or otherwise. And it's our right to do that as monastics. And the same as a Buddhist, someone who's just a Buddhist, it's your right to ask a monk for support and for guidance and for help. But you can't just send a letter. You've got to make a phone call. You've got to send multiple letters. You've got to make multiple phone calls, because you have to keep trying. You have to keep showing up. It's the only way to do it. In an ideal world, you'd send one letter and then you'd get enlightened. Or you'd try to sit for meditation one time and then you'd get enlightened. Or you'd try to go to one temple and you'd meet your perfect ideal teacher and master there, and you'd stay there for 20 years completely happy and enlightened. But that's not how it works. So we have to keep trying and keep showing up and keep reaching out, keep doing good deeds, and keep being willing to let go of uh, that which is not concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Yeah, you're welcome.
So many questions, but to be honest, it's come to the point where I feel like my mind is scrambled eggs. I keep returning to this birthright delusion that I could be of assistance through my learning and fix the way things are. I'm from Hollywood. I can observe things from even the little I've learned so far that it is a factory that can really get people swept away in delusive thinking. It's a delusion in itself to think that I can solve it. And it's always a shape shifting industry through many periods. COVID, now especially when societal temperament is changing when it comes to what watching a movie is or watching a television show is. I'm really caught up in my mind that I'll be coming back to a safe job. For a while, I thought, that payroll job for TV shows and movies was some sort of safe haven for me. Like many people, I've been one to strive for artistic excellence when it came to cinema, making movies, all of that. But it was a completely different dimensional headspace that is propped up by so much back end foundations that really keep people in delusive thinking. It wasn't until my uncle, who gave me a job in show business payroll, it was an involuntary opportunity that brought me into a different space of thinking to realize how much of a delusion it was. And for the many years that I've been working payroll and show business, I thought it was a very safe position to be in to really give space away from egoic values, make a paycheck, and still be in proximity of all the action I thought there was. My uncle passed the other week, and he was a safe zone of employment for myself, but uh, really merging more and more with how it was my own arrogance that took advantage of that.
Yeah. So,
I know that I am not going to be returning to anything of any great value or benefit, so I am doing my best for renunciation right now. This retreat has been a lot of battles with the ego. What am I coming back to? What kind of financial fitness do I need to be in to leave and embark upon?
well, in your situation, um, not that much. As long as you can get over to India, as long as you have this strong in your heart notion to do good deeds and to be a monk, then you can go and follow Sayadaw. And you'll talk with Sayadaw and Cindy about that and see how it goes. Um, but for the mind, pointing to the human condition and kind of the work that we're doing. So, humans, let's say, evolved from animals. Okay, an animal can die at any moment, but they don't know that. Um, they cannot incorporate that into the framework of their mind. All right, we also have that. So if you or I knew that we were going to die in 1 minute from now, okay, or the people who are watching at home, what would happen? You'd have a panic. It's like there's a meteor coming towards Earth or something like that, right? So mentally, our Buddhist practice is partly to recognize that we can die at any moment. And maybe in some sense we are dying at every moment because we can die at every moment. And we have to digest that. And that digestion is creating a lot of, let's say, acids in the stomach of our mind that dissolve wrong view, that dissolve greed, anger, and delusions. But if we try too much to digest the impermanence of our life, that literally we can die at any moment, that's the nature of being alive, we'll develop too much stomach acid, and we will burn the stomach, and we will hurt, right? We'll hurt ourselves. So the moment that you start to notice that you're contemplating or striving or focusing too intensively to try and resolve something, well, that's when you have a snack. That's when you step back. That's when you're gentle with yourself. That's when you heal. That's when you calm down the stomach. And when your heart and your mind and your body are there and your energy is there, your mindfulness is there, you can remember and digest impermanence. You can meditate on impermanence. You can meditate on another thing for those animals, right? They're not separate from the environment. Why is a giraffe's neck long? Because there's not separation there. But they can't contemplate that, whereas we can. And the same with the unsatisfactoriness, right? That no matter how many times a lion eats a buffalo, they're not going to be satisfied. That hunger is going to come back. So they cannot contemplate that, but we can. So the role or taking on this position of a monk is taking on that responsibility and taking on that willingness to do that. And through that, and through taking refuge in the historical Sangha and the teachings, realizing that, oh, if I'm seeking a relationship with somebody, if I'm looking for a wife, or if I'm looking for a sexual partner or a life partner, that's going to misdirect me from contemplating on the reality, okay, of birth and death, of no self, etc. Same with making money, same with overly emphasizing to pursue food, right? Luxurious food or luxurious housing or something like that. So we're practicing freely and openly, and we're being supported to do this kind of work. And as long as you want to do this kind of work, and you can use your wits and your time and your energy and your attention to do that, then you should be confident to be worthy of support. And there's some things we absolutely can't do. We have parajikas as a bhikshu. Once you become a fully ordained monk, you can't steal, you can't kill, you can't go around claiming to be enlightened when you're not, or when you don't fully understand that. You can't murder anybody. And this gives us a container to continue our practice, and for people to be able to trust us. Bante's not murdering anybody. Bante's not having sex with anybody. Bante's not going around stealing cars or stealing from people, right? Bante's not going around telling people he has spiritual powers, that he doesn't have. So that's enough. So, I'm willing to support him to continue his work and to be loving to him and gentle and compassionate with him. The Bhante and myself. There's all sorts of different versions of ourselves and parallel universes and perspectives. And I think is a title of an Ajahn Brahm talk or something. He's a monk, really wonderful monk, and he was saying how in somebody's view you're always wrong. So you can't cling too much to this idealism of being right or wrong, because in somebody's view, you're always wrong. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So patience, openness, and willingness to continue and to prioritize. being generous, being virtuous, being mindful, and being willing to let go. And it is very difficult. So it's not about doing it all in one stretch or doing it completely, but the willingness to refresh and restart and continue.
Letting go. If I were to ask you one big question, would it be wise to disrobe over the course of the next few days so I can really renounce my belongings and final goodbyes? I don't think it's something that
Well, let me give you a clear answer on it, okay? If we plan to have a hug tomorrow, how likely is that to happen? To hug each other. If we make a plan to give each other a hug tomorrow, how likely is that to happen? We don't know. If we stand up right now and we give each other a hug, then we don't have to rely on probabilities. So, it's not just about control, but it's it's your affinity, and as long as you're willing to try again and refresh and restart, then that's what you'll do. But never put your path out there. Even if you're gonna go out there, even if you're sure that you're gonna go to, I recently got an invitation to Taiwan. Somebody reached out to me, and they saw one of the podcasts that I did, and they were very inspired, and they apparently have really nice, wealthy man and family in Taiwan, and they invited me to come out there, and and I've been meaning to go to Taiwan. So even if I get in my head for sure I'm going to go to Taiwan tomorrow because that's where I want to go, right? If I put my life over there, I'm missing out on this. And I'm not going to be able to use this to be free, to help others, to transform whatever is there within myself, right? To see clearly this. And that's where my whole life is, and that's more, in terms of that being a practice, that's like wisdom, that's like a form of enlightenment. But in terms of that being a principle, it's something to just to help give you some guidance, that don't be too easily um, led along or kind of controlled by this idea of your path being out there, even if you're sure about it.
couldn't have heard anything better.
Yeah. So you can go to see, go to look for them. Right?
I'm going to find Cindy. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Cindy will help. She's really nice.
To be continued.
Yeah. Um, When we talk about letting go, or when we start to think about letting go, um, it's very easy for it to get into this place of rejection. We're trying to get rid of something. We're trying to run away from something, and that's very stressful. You're trying to erase something that's there. It's already there. You're trying to erase it. It's very stressful. You're trying to get rid of or destroy something. It's very stressful. So, what letting go is more connected to is loving kindness to what already is, okay? And then generosity. Loving kindness to what already is and generosity. Generosity to share. Because in generosity is transformation, not just destruction. Whereas when you buy something, it's kind of like it's an exchange where you're destroying something to get something else. But in generosity, you're not trying to get something. You're just giving. And in the same way, when you're practicing loving kindness, it's not if that thing is good or bad or right or wrong or beautiful or ugly. It's loving kindness to what already is. I was practicing metta. I was having just like some fear coming up in the mind and some intensity coming up in the mind, even some like visualizations in my meditation practice. It's a little bit scary. And I was practicing I was practicing metta or loving kindness like this. May this be kind. May this be gentle. May this be at peace. May this be free from suffering. And what is this? Well, maybe it's not a thing to begin with. Maybe calling our life or ourselves or the world or our experiences things, these separate things, is kind of missing um, a connection point to what already is, regardless of things or separation. So the context of our lives is so important, the context that we put ourselves into. And it's not as much about like living a great life and having great experiences as much as it is about uh, being able to see what already is and the fullness and wholesomeness of what already is. Especially when we have to go through so much suffering and so much intense difficulty, and then we're identifying with those things, and it becomes this never-ending cycle of fear and judgment and an identity based on past experiences that aren't wonderful and beautiful, and that just leaves us trapped, keeps us to be trapped for our whole lives. So some monks get to say that they don't have any money, that they don't use money, and you know, lucky them. Uh, but I do use money to uh, mainly to get to the monastery or the temple um, that I'm going to stay at, and usually uh, that is a monastery or temple that either there's a retreat being conducted by my teacher and maybe eventually by me. Uh, but usually there's a master there. There's a teacher there. There's someone who uh, I see them or I see their community as being essential for me uh, to concentrate, to deepen my understanding of my own mind, and to become more skillful in how I relate to myself and how I relate to others. But in terms of like trying to make money so that I have a place to stay, or make money so that I have food to eat, or even to make money so that I can get the things that I want, I have the luxury and the joy and the freedom to say that I don't have to do any of that and that I don't want to do any of that. And it was one of my insights before I became a monk that all of the money that I was making and all of the nice things that I had to give myself pleasure weren't really bringing meaning into my life and weren't helping me develop myself. So I've always liked video games and playing video games and having a good time, and it kind of naturally, by reprioritizing how I focus the direction of my mind and of my life to be focused on freedom, I find that I don't really get much benefit or get much enjoyment or have much interest in playing video games now. So if I did play video games, it would primarily be to help people or to have an experiment, like how does my mind react to this? And I've seen that that's not something that I have so much interest in. Uh, that those experiments and that those avenues for helping people are not, and helping myself are not that potent. And I seek for potency in my life, potency of healing and potency of developing a sense of freedom and a sense of a capacity for myself to relate to the freedom that is already. And that has to do with generosity. I was leading a group sharing today for this retreat. Someone was asking me, how do you practice generosity? And I think some people feel that, like, well, okay, you're a monk, so you stay at a temple, and people give you food, and if you need something, people give that to you or help you with that. So how are you practicing generosity? With mindfulness and detachment, through mindfulness and detachment now. And we can say that is the giving of the Dhamma, and we can say that is the highest generosity, and that there's no more valuable giving than that. It's really community based. And this is something that I've actually stepped back from leading community and organizing community so that I can have um, a better connection to the essence of how I'm working with community and myself and the people that I'm already around, and maybe people who have more experience, so that I will be able to facilitate community more in the future and build community more in the future. Um, Without community, there's no humanity. And Buddhist groups and temples and centers and monasteries and meditation centers, um, are all based around community, and a community that takes refuge in generosity and resource redistribution and volunteering. So people meet monks, or people go to temples, or people attend retreats, or people have a belief in Buddhism and the structure of monasticism and sanghas and monks, and they have a faith and an experience of that being beneficial, and then they want to support that through volunteering, through donations, through buildings, um, through building, through offering services. You know, a lot of times monks don't have medical care, so they get their medical care from members of the Buddhist community that happen to be doctors. You know, people that aren't monks but that are very important, major members of the community. The sangha is actually fourfold sangha. So monks and nuns, and also male and female lay people, because monks and nuns essentially cannot survive, cannot live without um, lay supporters, without donors, without people who put food in the monk's bowl. So in that way, monks are like a living symbol of um, the essential need for generosity in human life and in human relationships. And that um, we can help each other without becoming entangled in each other. And that we can be kind without meanness. That we can be generous without selfishness. That we can realize no self without a self. Vipassana is mindfulness and detachment. You can understand Vipassana as a special seeing, seeing without attachment, or awareness without attachment. And you can think about that special seeing as like a muscle, so that seeing without attachment is like a muscle or a power. And the more that you emphasize the Buddhist path, the more that you can develop this muscle of seeing without attachment. And through seeing or experiencing without attachment, you gain insight into the nature of things, or the nature of reality, rather than the kind of appearance of reality, right? So that, for example, the nature of pain and the nature of pleasure is impermanent. The nature of pain and the nature of pleasure is not separate from its opposite, and that both pain and pleasure are unsatisfactory, that we will never be satisfied, we will never be released by experiencing pleasure. And in the same way, we will never be damned or bound to hell because of experiencing pain. And this is a very powerful key for mental health issues, for people who maybe have schizophrenia, or people who have depression, or people who have anxiety, or people who have a lot of self-focused, self-fixated negative thinking about themselves. Even though you felt all this pain, even though you felt all this kind of strange experiences, strange thoughts, strange aspects of your personality, and that you identify with that, yeah, it's not ideal. It'd be better if it wasn't like that. But that fundamentally, that is a sign of that thought, that anxiety, that depression is a sign of impermanence, a sign of no self. or no separation, and a sign of unsatisfactoriness. So, not to grasp, not to attach, not to identify with that. And I've been working a lot. This word has been coming up for me strongly in my Dhamma, is unnecessary. So there's certain kind of thinking, there's certain kind of habit energy, there's certain kind of seeking towards pleasure or seeking to avoid pain, or kind of how we make structures in our mind or how we interact with other people, that there's a lot of unnecessariness in it. And so try to work with your negative habit energies or your complexes that you develop in such a way where you're not trying to get rid of it, but but rather you're not trying to participate in it unnecessarily. So when that recognition of ill will, when that recognition of criticism, when that recognition of like infatuation comes up or a seeking comes up, okay, deal with that, be with that, that's happening. But to the degree that you are aware of that, you may see that it is unnecessary to perpetuate that. And through seeing that unnecessariness of that involvement with that idea, with that sensation in the body, with that experience, with that person, with that place, etc., there's a real freedom that blossoms. The freedom of recognizing the unnecessariness of involvement, we could also say, is vipassana. Or panya. We could say that's wisdom as well. Now, concerned with the schizophrenia or the mental health issues, and as that relates to like drugs and psychedelics or certain medicines, we have to look at the context that we live our lives. So even if you have some profound spiritual experience, if you have to go back to your job with your, or you have to go back to your if you're a kid, you have to go back to your home with your abusive parents or what have you. That's not really the root of the issue, whether you have a powerful spiritual experience or not. It's the context of your life. It's what your life is mostly concerned with, the environment that you're mostly concerned with. And it's a reason that a lot of people don't have much success or spiritual development just because they go to an ayahuasca ceremony, or just because they go and have some kind of special shroom trip, or whatever. They go to an EDM party. Because the integration, the context, the community that they go back into, um, is not helping very much, not helping very deeply. And this is especially true for children who develop ADHD or anxiety or depression, and then their abusive parents or their deeply suffering parents take that child to a psychiatrist or a doctor, and now that kid is taking SSRIs or something, Abilify and all these different medicines, when the issue is their parents and where they live. That's a major part of what needs to be cured and what needs to be worked through. And so the more that we work with that ourselves, the more that we'll have a capacity to do systems change that can affect those children as well, and those people in need as well. Okay, we'll leave it at that for now. Um, be patient, be kind, be gentle. Don't overly judge yourself and don't overly judge others. Watch out for criticism, watch out for ill will. When we criticize others, when we cultivate ill will towards others, that sets up the patterns for ill will in our own mind that we then have to deal with. The same with criticism. And have faith that a part of you, or a part of you that is not you, not self, knows the right way to go. And know that wherever you go will be wherever you are, and that wherever you are is home. And that home is where the heart is. Home is where the breathing is. Home is where freedom is. Nowhere else. The greatest prayer that we can give and receive is the prayer of just being where we already are. Breathing without ill will, without judgment, without thought or worry about control. And to know that this is where we truly are. This is what is truly happening. And this is truly and clearly and already not something, not a thing. And it's really, I tell you, a lot of it is learning to use our gut, learning to use our intuition, learning to use our heart, and trusting that more in this moment, in meditation. Not how do we think ourselves through the meditation, or how do we think ourselves through this life, but how do we allow the heart to be informed by kindful awareness towards it, and vice versa. May all the merits and blessings that we have made till now be dedicated and shared out towards all beings. May all beings find release through peace within themselves with the way that things already are. Breathing in, I am home. Breathing out, I am free. Home, free.